And welcome back into this live episode of Twins Takes. I'm Troy John alongside Twins Insider and Twins Central for this episode. The Twins had a really exciting series win over the Cardinals this weekend. Fellas, how are we feeling today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Troy? And Twins Insider, how are you doing as well?
I'm doing great. That was a really fun weekend.
It was a really exciting weekend down at Target Field this weekend. Twins getting a huge series win. But with that, let's go into the news right now.
Breaking news.
Well, I got some bad news for you.
Extra.
Good news, everyone.
It's time for the news.
It's a pretty busy week in terms of news, with the first off, the Twins taking 2 out of 3 from the Cardinals in a really exciting series. We'll get into that in a little bit, but a lot of injury updates, mostly positive for the most part. Walker Jenkins, first off, started a rehab assignment Saturday with Fort Myers and got a 4-hit game in his first game back. He looked really good. Swing looked really good. The exit velocities, I believe, were pretty solid as well. And he got just recently, a couple of minutes ago, just got transferred to high A on his rehab assignment. So slowly making his way back. And slowly making their ways back are Kendry Rojas and Mick Abel. Mick Abel had a light bullpen recently, and he will have his final, at least one more rehab start, presumably coming up this week, and then his next start will be back at the big league level.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge boost, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited to get Mick Abel back just because, right now they're basically rolling with 4 starters. We're going to see Mike Paredes take the ball again. He's been admirable in the role that the Twins have put him in. It's just clear that he's, he might be a major league reliever, but he certainly isn't a major league starter. He's done what you've asked him to do, but it'll be big to get not just Abel, but hopefully Rojas as well. I assume both of those guys, Abel obviously will go into the rotation. I am curious to see what they will do with Kendry Rojas. We saw him in that, 2 to 3 inning role before his injury.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Just will be a lot helpful for this depth that has kind of taken a hit in the last few weeks. Some of the pitching starting to labor a bit, as we'll get into a little bit later. But also on the negative side of things, Hendry Mendez was placed on the 7-day IL with left shoulder impingement this week. Little unfortunate, but doesn't seem too serious on that front. So hopefully he'll be back pretty quickly. Alan Roden, another corner outfielder for the Twins, was just recently reassigned to St. Paul on his rehab assignment. We probably might be able to see him pretty soon. Now, I know that Twins recently called up Kyler Fedko. We'll get into that, but it's going to be really interesting to see what they'll do with him, and if Fedko's up for, I would guess, this next week or so, and then Roden gets his chance back at the big league level.
Yeah, we'll get into it later, but you kind of imagine Martin and Fedko are sort of dueling it out for one spot, and whoever goes down, Roden will take that place probably in a week or so. You need to see Roden play for like a month and a half and just kind of, he's not young. You just want to find out what he is. And then if you don't like what he is, you can obviously get into Jenkins and Emma and Mendez. But Roden was obviously one of the pieces of that kind of questionable trade. So they really need to see what he can do.
Yeah, I think some other names that are also on the fringes of this, sort of quote unquote roster battle, Josh Bell. It's getting late early on him if he continues to struggle. Fedko is a guy that has played some first. We've obviously seen Royce Lewis play at first base, so they could push him out of the mix. Ryan Kreidler, who had a big game yesterday, he's another guy that hasn't played a ton, although I think we all hope he's going to play a little bit more now, but they certainly have options to get Alan Roden up here, like Insider mentioned. It does no good to send him back to AAA for any length of time. I would hope by the next homestand, maybe he's back with the big leagues and let him sink or swim, whether that's good or bad. You need to find out if he can be in your plans for 2027 and beyond.
Yeah, and there's another guy that's sort of the fingerprints are all over this roster spot. Obviously, we've talked about him a ton, but it's Kalen Culpepper, and we hoped he'd be in the news today because we'd be talking about a call-up. That's not the case. For those who didn't hear, on Saturday's game, he got pulled out with glute tightness, so seemingly a minor injury day to day, but just I don't know why this seems to happen all the time with these Twins prospects, but just kind of annoying again.
Yeah, it always seems to happen when they seemingly are on the cusp of a call up realistically, but unfortunately, just that in tightness it doesn't seem too serious again, but hopefully he's back in at least the St. Paul lineup this week. When he was pulled out of the game on Saturday, I believe it was, people thought that, he was pulled out. Maybe this is a call-up potentially, but it wasn't to be. Dan Hayes reported that if he was to be called up, say the next day or sometime like that, he would have not been in the lineup at all. So unfortunately, it wasn't on the cards for him at least this week. Hopefully, sometime in the next week or so. But a guy that did get a couple of call-ups was Kyler Fedko, of course. We'll talk about him later on in the show, but he was selected onto the 40-man Orlando RCO was designated for assignment. Another call-up that has kind of gone under the radar, Enrique Jimenez. He's just about in the Twins' top 30 prospects on MLB.com. He was acquired in the Chris Paddock trade last year from the Tigers. And so far at Fort Myers this year, he has 2 home runs, 8 RBIs. He's slashing .314 average, a .490 on base percentage, and an over 1,000 OPS. Now, what's interesting about him, he's a switch hitting catcher. He's just 20 years old. Maybe there is seemingly something with him. Maybe not. But with an organization that kind of needs the catcher depth it can get, with what's happened with Alex Jackson this year so far, I think Jimenez is a prospect to at least keep your eyes on. It's a little bit too early for me to really judge him, but he's up at Cedar Rapids right now, so hopefully he'll show out there.
Yeah, I can remember getting him for Chris Paddock last year. Just getting someone for Chris Paddock and Randy Dobnak was just a good trade in and of itself. But he profiles as a guy who could someday be a pretty good backup catcher. He's probably the best defensive catcher they have at any level. The switch hitter thing is nice, and one day he could be a solid backup or a trade chip down the line if the team is more competitive in the future year.
Yeah, he has played some games at first base as well. In 34 games at A-ball, he does have more walks than strikeouts. That is not the case in his, almost 100 games at rookie ball, but it is interesting that his control of the strike zone has been pretty good. Not a huge sample size there, but like you guys said, he's a prospect, maybe not worth following, but at least keeping an eye on. He's somebody that could become something. In all likelihood, probably organizational filler, maybe gets called up to be a backup a time or two, but certainly, you could do a lot worse for Chris Paddock.
Yeah, again, just getting something out of Paddock was incredible, and Randy Dobnak as well. Like we mentioned, McAble will be starting at St. Paul and Kendry Rojas during their rehab assignments this week. And again, like Dan Hayes reported, McAble will be next start after his rehab will probably be at the big league level. Now getting into our main topics, including this weekend's games between the St. Louis Cardinals. I would like to say that the best win of the season for the Twins came on Friday, and I don't know if there has been a better win in terms of being able to fight back from being down a bunch of times in that game, specifically on Friday. They're down 7-4. At one point, they were down 4-2. It seemed like every time the Twins responded, the Cardinals punched back, and the Twins punched back even bigger. So I just right off the top of my head, because I'm not really good, just honestly, I'm not really good at remembering games off the top of my head, but I think this was the best win of the season. You could also argue Sunday's game was also up there in terms of the best wins of the season. What do you think?
I almost liked the Sunday one more because the team actually pitched okay. It wasn't, they didn't allow 8 runs, but Friday's game was kind of a crazy game. It was multiple improbable comebacks and just the whole series. I mean, both teams, like you said, were just fighting. Every time they got down, they punched back. The Twins got down by 5 on the loss, and they still had the tying run at the plate. So, Byron Buxton, Alec Burleson, Jordan Walker, Royce Lewis, these great players showed out. It was really was one of the more fun series I can remember this year. Just start to finish, all 27 innings, all 27 outs. Great fun to watch.
Yeah, there wasn't really a boring inning I can remember from this series. It just felt like something was going to happen every inning, whether it was a hitter would hit an absolute mood shot or there's just solid pitching on the mound. Joe Ryan on Friday pitched. It didn't feel like he had a good start, but then you look at his stat line, he pitched 6 innings, didn't walk anybody, and struck out 8. And so he was still really efficient. That was probably the best start that any Twins starter had this week. We'll get into the struggles of the pitching just in general this week, but he actually pitched very well. And then, of course, Cody Clemens, game-tying 3-run home run in the 7th inning. Royce Lewis, game-tying home run in the 8th inning. And then Brooks Lee, the go-ahead home run in the 8th. Andrew Morris got a very clean save, one of the cleanest innings he's pitched all year. And then of course on Sunday, just being able to fight back from 4-0 down, just chipping away at the Cardinals. Royce Lewis tying the game with an RBI single. Again, we'll touch on him a little bit later, but talk about Ryan Kreidler coming off the bench in that game on Sunday. He goes 2 for 2, hits the go-ahead RBI double. And, that's just something that this team really needed. I think that one of these, fringe bench players that in a spot where you really needed it to happen. Keishel roped a double down the left field line in the previous at-bat, and then Kreidler steps in and has really kind of established himself as a bench player on this team. It's kind of been surprising, but he really came up big on Sunday in a spot where I never would have thought he would. I respect he would round it out to end the inning or whatnot, but he really came up big in that spot.
Yeah, the 3 backup shortstops, I guess now it's 2 with Orlando Arcia being off the roster. They've both been, fine. Tristan Gray's had a few games where he's absolutely carried the lineup. Kreidler had a few big home runs when he first came up. That has kind of went away as of late, but then he had the big hits on Sunday. So I think all of us would like to see Kreidler play at shortstop more. I think Insider mentioned with Fedko being on the roster, that does take him out of, needing to be the backup center fielder. So hopefully you can give him some more games at shortstop. The Twins do face a lefty here in, an hour or so. And he is starting at shortstop. So it remains to be seen what the plan is there. I think we've talked about it plenty. Another guy that you didn't talk about, Victor Caratini, had a big swing this weekend. It is good to see him get going a little bit. I know I, along with, everybody else in this podcast, but me especially, have been pretty critical of him. His numbers are creeping up to respectable. He still has a 630 OPS, which is nowhere where it needs to be. The batting average still just 215, but he is starting to hit a little bit more. So if they can get that out of him, especially with Jeffers being injured and Alex Jackson basically being nothing, that would be, huge for this team that's trying to creep back towards 500.
Yeah, and it always seems like when Victor Caratini, you need a big swing out of him. He does have a big swing. All of the 4 home runs he's had this year, he's just absolutely tattooed the ball. Just a really smooth swing out of him, really aggressive swing. I just wish that we would see more out of him. Hopefully, though, his advanced numbers have always been solid this year, so hopefully that is starting to creep towards those numbers. But at the very least, he came up big, and that was good to see from him.
Yeah, I just think generally, like you mentioned, Caratini by ex-Woba versus Woba for a while was the unluckiest player in the league. And the fact he's really slow is part of that, but he's a solid hitter, especially for a guy who catches. But I think up and down this lineup, there's some really good players and there's a lot of really solid or mediocre players, however you want to phrase that. The lineup is not the problem. But the problem, of course, has been the pitching and the bullpen and the pitching as a whole.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that on that part. But sometimes it's the lineup's fault. Been the lineup's fault this year. Sometimes it's been the bullpen's fault this year. And I think in the loss, especially on Saturday this week, we'll transition into just the struggles of the pitching staff in general. The bullpen gave up 5 earned runs in 3 innings on Friday, 5 earned runs on Saturday in 3 innings, and it was especially egregious on Saturday. The Twins, were kind of working with a shorthanded bullpen that day, haven't used all their best, having to basically been forced their hand to use their best arms on Friday. And it was completely awful. And we've written here on our rundown here on our doc that Justin Lawrence is awful. And I have to agree, he's just looked rough in the very limited outings we've seen from him. He's been what you expect, just veteran fodder that has completely flamed out. He has good stuff, but doesn't really matter when you can't even command a strike zone like he has the 2 times he's been used in high leverage this season.
Yeah, Justin Lawrence, I expect to be gone soon. He really is awful. I was the one who wrote that, and I don't want to pick on the guy, but he just can't. He's been DFA'd multiple times because he can't aim the ball. But if you want to have a bad developmental high stuff guy, to me, there are a couple internal guys that are a lot younger than his 31 years old. I don't want to, harp on Lawrence too much, but it is kind of a symptom of the overall problem where you end up having a bullpen full of bad players you're taking flyers on because you traded away 5 really good relievers and didn't sign enough good ones.
Yeah, and I said this at the time that Lawrence was acquired. There was a few people, including on this podcast, that were somewhat excited about him. I just didn't understand that at all. This is a guy that he's the archetype that fools front office types into thinking that he's fixable because he has such good stuff. But there's just a control, line that you need to meet in order to be a major league pitcher. Justin Lawrence is not to that line. He's not anywhere close to that line. He's simply a bad pitcher. He has elite stuff, but that's the only thing he does at a major league level. He gives up a lot of hits with his fastball, which is pretty bad. The slider is good, but just in no way, shape, or form should he be on a major league roster, even a bullpen that is as shaky as the Twins. I unfortunately am taking a victory lap on this one. Justin Lawrence, not a major league pitcher. I think most of us should have seen that coming if we look beyond the one good season that he had in Colorado.
Yeah, that's a fair victory lap. And even in his bad outing, he got 2 strikeouts because his stuff looked good, and then he gave up 4 hits, including a 117-mile-an-hour home run. So, like, I got tricked by the stuff, I'll admit, and Central was absolutely right on this one.
Yeah, I was completely fooled by the stuff as well. And given that he had high K per 9 numbers, this is a bullpen that, hasn't struck out a lot of guys this season. I would at least hope that he would stick for a couple of weeks, get a couple of strikeouts. He has gotten strikeouts, but also he's been completely bad outside of all of those things. And just in general, the pitching staff was bad this week. We really only saw one really good start this week, and that was from Joe Ryan. Taj Bradley and Connor Phillip did go into the 6th inning. They had a little bit more rough starts, but they did eventually. But for the most part, they were fine. Just not what you want to see. And this is why Kendry Rojas and Nick Abel coming back can really help out. I think the starting pitching. Phillip, I know, is kind of creeping up towards the innings limit, I think, and it seemingly is trending towards that they'll shut him down at some point this season, or I don't know how they'll do it, but he's on track for max for his career innings, even more than he's thrown in the minor leagues. So it's interesting what they'll do with him. Taj Bradley was pretty good for 5 innings on Sunday, and then he gave up a couple of home runs on Sunday in the 6th inning, but he did push through. He did get through 7 innings, so. For the most part, it wasn't a bad start, but but again, the Twins pitching from the bullpen to the starting pitching, going back to the Detroit series as well, it just wasn't the best. 10 runs. They were 10 runs on Tuesday, 4 on Wednesday. That was their win. 11 in the loss on Thursday, 8 on Friday, 9 on Saturday, and 4 in their win on Sunday. So for the most part, it was just really rough from the pitching staff, except for the Saturday game. Not Saturday. Yes, the Friday and the Sunday game, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, it was really rough, and that's why you read those numbers, and somebody in the background was displeased with them because they had quite a yell about that. It's just at some point the Twins I believe they've allowed the 2nd or 3rd most runs in the American League, and ultimately the injuries are probably to blame, the injuries and then the lack of offseason moves, but. Regardless, you can't really win games like that. They managed to win that 9-8 game, but either you're going to stop giving up so many runs or you're not going to win. It's really that simple.
Yeah, and I think the injuries are almost certainly to blame for that. They're starting, Mike Paredes or a bullpen game every 5th day for now. Connor Phillip, like Troy mentioned, has kind of hit a rookie wall here. Taj Bradley's another guy. He's at 71 in 2/3 innings. The most innings he's ever thrown in the big leagues is 142. That was just last season. So he's on pace to blow by that. He's been pretty shaky here as of late, which we all saw this, I think, coming to a certain extent. The home runs per 9 were really, really down when he was, got out of the gates quickly. They're back into his career numbers. He's at 1.4 home runs per 9 innings. Now on the 2026 season, throughout his career, he averages 1.5. So those have regressed back to normal. They've been worse than normal over the last few starts just to even get back to that number. So hopefully we see some now positive regression on that front. But I think this is kind of to be expected now. Hopefully we see some help, in the form of Mick Abel returning, with Kendry Rojas returning, whether that is as a starter or a reliever. They are getting help back here within the next week, hopefully.
Yeah, and I hopefully that will alleviate the pressure that Phillip and Bradley have to go, 7 innings every start like Bradley did, 6 innings like Phillip did on Saturday. But somebody that has been on an absolute tear as of late has been Royce Lewis. He had a big series against the Cardinals, and recently, since he's came up 10 for 24 and over 400 batting average, he's had 3 home runs. He's had 3 straight multi-hit games. He had 3 straight multi-hit games at one point. He only had 1 hit on Sunday, but of course it was the big RBI. He also stole a base. He's hit 3 home runs. just overall, the peripherals have looked in this stretch have just looked really good. It's looked like 2023 Royce. Every every clutch hit it seems he's had this week has been just absolutely tattooed. 107-mile-an-hour home run hit on Friday, an absolute moonshot out to left field. The 97-mile-an-hour and RBI single that tied the game last week. Just absolutely incredible stuff from Royce, really. And before he was demoted, he was 10 for 72 at the big league level. So he's really just found his groove.
Yeah, again, those Royce numbers have someone fired up. I think it's fun to see, and what's most fun to see about it to me, first of all, just to see him smiling again, but because he's so energetic and he's so expressive. But it's fun to see because I don't necessarily think it's a fluke. Because when he was really good for 500 plate appearances a couple years ago, this is what it looked like. So as long as he stays healthy, he can kind of play like this because he's done it before, I think.
Yeah, since he got called up, he's played 8 games. He's 11 for 29. That's a 379 average. He has 3 home runs, 2 doubles, stole a base. He's walked 3 times, only struck out 4 times, which that's something that everybody was paying attention to while he was down in St. Paul. He was crushing down there, obviously, but the strikeouts were still a little too high. He's kept those in check since he came back. He's controlled the strike zone. I haven't got to watch as many games as I would like to over the last week here. I've been busy with stuff, but it sounds like his defense at first base is, pretty good, which I think is to be expected with the athleticism that he has, even after these injuries. He's obviously more athletic than a Josh Bell or a Victor Caratini, who the Twins were giving reps to at first base prior to this. So you have to be encouraged by Lewis. He's not going to have a 1.183 OPS, which is what he has in these 8 games since he's been called up. But if he can OPS, 900 for the rest of the season, you have to feel really good about him going forward. I am curious if he keeps this up for the next, 6 weeks here. Are they going to dangle him, on the trade block, assuming the Twins don't make a run towards competitiveness here? Because I do think that's a real possibility that hasn't been talked about a lot.
Yeah, and we've discussed about this earlier, even when he was, really struggling, that how much of a bet will other teams take on, a former number 1 overall pick, because he has that pedigree, because he's still athletic for his age, and that he can play the corner infield spot, that he has really tantalizing power, and that the hot streaks he's on like he is right now are really elite. And, I think that is a possibility. It's something that we should keep in mind, especially when they're about 7 to 6 games, if there's still 6 to 7 games below 500 in July. But this is he when I've watched him, he's just looked more confident at the plate. He's just looked, a lot more when pitchers face him, they're just kind of pitching away to him, and he's taking them. He's taking like junk pitches, some pitches that he would have swung at, say, a couple months ago. In his last big league game before he was demoted, he struck out 3 times, and 3 of the worst at bats I've seen this season. This is a guy that has, a lot of faith in the fan base behind him because of his heroics in the playoffs. This is a guy that has been a lot of people have faith in him. I still have the faith in him that he can reach, the levels he reached 3 years ago. It's just at a point where, like, okay, I'm like really excited. I have to, be a little bit cautious though, because he could fall back down to hurt. We don't know that, but for now, he's playing with so much confidence, and if you can keep that confidence up, the Twins are going to start winning games.
Yeah, I mean, if you can keep him and Byron rolling with the just the raw production and the swagger they have, you're going to score a ton of runs. But again, unfortunately, with both of those two, it always feels like a matter of when, not if, with as far as the injuries. But if they can keep rolling, they can stay healthy, they can do some damage.
Yeah, a guy who is going to try to help them win games in the near term is Kyler Fedko. He was called up today, will make his MLB debut in just a short while. He was a 12th round pick out of UConn in 2021. He's a guy that's the Twins have slowly let develop. He was unprotected in the Rule 5 draft this past offseason. It was a name that we were keeping an eye on that teams could maybe select. He's already 26. He had a great year in AAA last year, but teams opted to pass on them. He's came back in 2026 gotten even better. He has a 950 OPS for the Saints. He's right-handed, can play all three outfield spots, can also play first base. Just what are your guys' initial reactions and expectations for Kyler Fedko?
Yeah, I know we had a Ask Twins Take question about him a couple of weeks ago, and I kind of compared him to Anthony Prado pretty unfairly, just for the sake that he was an older prospect. He's a guy that, I just didn't really see a future on this roster given the younger players that are at AAA. But he has really good numbers at AAA. The peripherals look really solid, and he's a guy that, again, can really provide cover in the outfield, which I think the Twins need. At least a guy that can play all three spots in the outfield consistently, can play a little bit first as well. He's starting in left field tonight, and he's a guy that has just, again, gotten better. He's one of those late bloomer types, and I think that's a guy that it's interesting you can bet on. You can give a chance to him. And last year in the minors, he had 38 stolen bases as well. So if he gets on base, he can protect. You think he has the threat to steal, and Shelton will probably give him the green light. He has decent speed and has some power as well. So, I'm at least intrigued to see what he does if he's only up because they're waiting for Rodin's rehab assignment to end. But he could really establish himself in the next week or so, give the Twins a little bit of versatility on defense and a speed and power combo that they really don't have on this roster outside of Buxton.
Yeah, we've talked about, like if he plays well for a week or whatever, he could basically take Austin Martin's job, because his struggles have really opened up a runway for Fedko. But I've seen a lot of people make the McCusker comp, which I get it. You're just saying, older guy produced well in AAA, but let's remember that McCusker was undrafted. Fedko was actually drafted. Fedko, I think, is a year or two younger, but most importantly, the whiff and the zone contact and all that kind of stuff, it's a lot better. McCusker had like bad discipline, bad strike zone control, high whiffs. Fedko is like average in AAA for that. So he's not just going to be a strikeout machine. And then that's also the athleticism. He, like Troy said, he can actually run. He actually will be a plus in the corners and should be able to hold up in center field. So that's what makes him different than a lot of these. The Anthony Prado, who I think was a first baseman, kind of DH guy. Even Aaron Sabato is kind of a first base DH. It's the athletic ability that makes Fedko, have at least a bench or a platoon role, I think.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the McCusker comparison a little bit too, because I just thought that was completely off base. It was something that I was seeing online earlier when he got called up. McCusker in his 2025 season at AAA struck out 34% of the time. Kyler Fedko throughout his minor league career has been a guy that's been in the upper teens when he was in the low minors. And since he's been at AA or AAA, has been in the low 20s, 22% this year. So he strikes out a lot less. He also walks a lot more. He walks nearly 11% of the time this year, which was also the same as last year. So you can expect him at the majors. He's probably going to walk at a league average rate. He's going to strike out at less than a league average rate. They do have, similar power. McCusker obviously is a giant compared to Fedko. Fedko is 6', 215. So, 8 inches shorter than McCusker is, but these guys aren't similar at all. I think McCusker was more of a gimmick player or prospect, which is a little unfair to him. I mean, he's a good baseball player and he's overseas now trying to, make it back to the US. But I think Fedko is more of a borderline. If things click and this is going to be his one chance, he's going to get one chance here. If he's bad, he's going to get shipped off and maybe never make the majors again. If he's good, he could carve out a role on this team for not just this year, but next year as well.
Yeah, because we've talked about it a bunch in the previous episodes. Good organizations turn these types of guys into usable bench players. This is a guy's a 12th round pick. I mean, it's not just some random independent ball signing. This is a guy who you should be able to maybe get some kind of utility out of, and it would be helpful because instead of
53,
unlucky. Instead of spending $8 million on a Randall Grichuk kind of guy, you can actually get a backup platoon guy for cheap. And now we can play that video, Troy.
Yes, we have a video pulled up from his college days at UConn. So he actually comes from a very strong media background. His dad was a sports anchor, and his his sister is also a news anchor as well. And take a look at this. This is from his 2021 season when he was at UConn.
All right, time now 6:53. Guys, I always talk about how I know nothing about sports, but you'd be surprised. I actually come from a very athletic family. This right here is my little brother Kyler, but he's not just a regular college student. He's a Division I baseball player at the University of Connecticut with my other brother Christian. Now, he made a very big accomplishment yesterday. Take a look.
Prime location, Barcelona wins at 4-1.
You showed us all those homers by Texas Tech. This is UConn and Texas Tech. Way back, watch Kyler Fedko. It's coming back. That's robbery.
So check out that catch. Oh my goodness. Yes, that is my little brother on number 2 on ESPN Top 10. I am so proud of him, and I just absolutely had to show you guys.
Yeah, I think that's a great video. First of all, it tells you a lot about, like you said, his family and their sports background, and just that game. You saw the incredible catch and the kind of hard-nosed, gritty play. But I was actually talking with his father, John, who you mentioned, and he described this as the best game of his college career. And it was in Texas, so maybe he likes to play in Texas. That could be good tonight. But that was in 2021 on a bad UConn team versus a top 10 Texas Tech team. And he went 5 for 5 and had that home run robbery. So, it shows that even on a not great college team, he stood out. And that, honestly, it's possible he got drafted because of that game. The scouts were probably at the Texas Tech game and then saw this guy on the other team. But it just shows the type of, I think Twins fans are going to love this player if he can hit at all, because he's going to approach the game the right way. He's going to give his best effort. He's going to run hard. He's going to play defense the right way. It's all the things that Twins fans want to see from their players. So I'm excited for him.
Yeah, and I'm just excited that this is a decision that they made. Like, do I think Fedko's a good player? I think there's a chance that he is at least a good bench bat. But even if he isn't, I'm glad we're taking a look at him over, keeping the James Outmans around, over keeping Orlando Arcia around, over guys that there's no chance that they're going to contribute to the next good Twins team. Is there a high chance Kyler Fedko is going to be on the next, division winning or playoff bound Twins team? Not super high, but it's a hell of a lot higher than Orlando Arcia or Tristan Gray or even, Ryan Kreidler. I'm excited that this is something that they've decided to do now. Hopefully over the next few months, they continue to do this in other areas. There's other guys as well, like, Gabriel Gonzalez on the hitting side that I'd like to get a look at. We saw him make his major league debut when Tristan Gray was on the paternity list. There's guys on the pitching side, certainly like a Marco Raya, who they haven't called up yet, who's in a similar boat, I would say, kind of seen his prospect stardom fade away, but I still believe could at least be a useful reliever. So even if Fedko isn't productive, I'm glad that they're giving him a chance, because this is exactly what you need to do in a season where you're going to win, low to mid 70 games.
Yeah, and it's just good for the sake of his family's going to be at the game tonight. They seem very excited about, he comes from a very strong background, a very strong media background as well, and I feel like that's really admirable. His family seems to really care. He's seems like a really good kid as well, and it's just a really exciting opportunity for him at 26 that he's finally has a chance at the big league roster. I'm really excited for him, even if it doesn't work out. Again, you're still glad that they at least took a look at him for this upcoming series and really for the next week or so. But coming up next year on Twins take a break on this live episode, we're going to talk about this upcoming series against Texas and also take our series takeaways from St. Louis and predictions as well.